go all in. I mean, it's something, if you're going to get into it, it's like, was it Parks and Rec? Like, don't whole or half-ass it. You got to whole-ass it. So go all in. You can't sit there to the side and say, I'm going to work on this small business, but I'm going to do it under the confines of 9 to 5. Like, if you jump in and you're not the founder, or you're someone early that's joining in, like, you got to look at it as this is your baby too, right? And so just because you join in and there's no huge equity stake that's given to you out of the gate, like, it still behooves you to help out.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Ryan Bass. And Ryan grew up in a small town called Pocahontas, Missouri, and learned to work hard, had a good work ethic as he grew up on a small farm, a 16-acre or so farm, and helped out with the families, went to college to playing soccer and was a goalkeeper. Thought about going pro, but decided that given that he was 6 foot, which is apparently shorter for a goalie, decided his prospects weren't as good. So went off and decided to pursue the college degree and do that. Came out of school, worked for Cerner doing electronic records, and worked for a couple of other hospitals before deciding to start his own business in the healthcare industry. And he'll clue us in a little bit more about what that is. So with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Devin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to have you on. So I just gave the much more condensed version of a longer journey. So take us back a bit in time to how your journey got started in Pocahontas, Idaho, or Missouri.
Yeah. Yeah. I think saying it's a small town is kind of an upgrade on what it really is. So Pocahontas is like the village. So literally there was like 12 churches for the 100 people, but one bar and one post office. So yeah, grew up in the middle of the country. We had chickens and all that fun stuff. And so I played a lot of soccer. That was kind of my outlet. Used that throughout high school and into college, and was a 2-time All-American in college, a scholar All-American. As you mentioned, like the pay and stuff to do the prospect of becoming a professional if you're not going to the EPL, or like now there's at least livable wages at the MLS to entry there. It's still pretty rough to be able to do something. So I looked at it and said, what do I want to put my body through, or do I want to, get a big boy job? And so I kind of landed with getting a big boy job, worked at Cerner. They throw you into random places. So I got put into regulatory compliance, got to read a whole bunch of fun law. And
one quick question, and I know we're interrupting the journey, but so soccer was, certainly it sounds like in high school and throughout a lot of college was a big focus, or at least a big part of your life. Now, what made you go from soccer, very athletic, outdoor, out and doing sports and competing, to electronic records for hospitals? Kind of how did you make that decision, or kind of what guided you in that direction?
It's really like until now, I didn't know what I wanted to do till I grew up. You know what I mean? Like, so it was, Cerner has a huge presence in Kansas City, and that's where I went to college. So I had a lot of friends that worked there. They spoke highly of like their experience, and was like, well, I got to do something, let's try this out and see how it goes. So, as I got into it, like I said, I got thrown into regulatory and compliance, and, as much fun as it is to read legal regulations and from CMS and everyone else, I kind of liked it. A lot of people look at it and say like, it's this monotonous, really long, like drawn out spell of what this legal requirement is. And then you have to interpret it. What are those next steps? But I kind of liked it because, every year it changes. You're not selling and doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, you got to spend some time and educate yourself a little bit. But at the end of the day, you get to go and attack something new, right? So I did everything from alphabet soup of like IQR, OQR, IPFQR, and, I won't get into all the acronyms there. But all that was like free text based, and like then you had to have somebody audit and like look and see if people actually like did what they said they were supposed to do. And then I got to lead all the ECQMs, which was electronic clinical or quality measures. And so with the electronic clinical quality measures, I basically got to move everything from free text to discrete documentation. Like when you do an order in the chart, when you do a drop down, when you do a radio button, that then completes kind of that compliance of what needs to be documented. So I kind of led all of that from a project management standpoint from Cerner and all their clients, and really like enjoyed the additional responsibility, the additional challenge, like not wanting to be the bottleneck. And so that's just kind of driven me in my career. And then through the hospital moves with my wife and her doing her med school and then residency, I've really gotten to see a lot of different areas within the health system and the hospital side of things, which then kind of allowed me to take kind of my past experience of, well, it's an outside vendor, here's a service, here's something I'm doing. And now I have experience with like, you're on the hospital side, how do we make whatever work? How do we get to the point where we're able to, support this new documentation features, or how do we get to, what do we have to do? So it kind of gives me a unique experience from being able to see the viewpoint from the vendor, from the health system side, the regulatory background, and being able to help interpret and say like, well, here's legally what you have to do. And now that you have this legal requirement, here are all the benefits that you can streamline that, today are either done manually or if at all, right? And then what's the impact to your patients, your health system, your bottom line?
No, and I think that makes perfect sense. So now as you get in, out of a few different motivations and you got into it, now you've worked with Cerner for about how long?
For that, like all in all, it was probably 2 to 3 years. I don't have my LinkedIn profile up in front of me, but I did everything from like I started with them when I was in college doing their nonprofit. So I worked at their First Hand Foundation, which basically like they give money to patients that are children that have displacement or other things that like a kid's family couldn't afford, so they pay for surgeries and everything that go along with it. So I started there and then moved into the consulting wing and then led that ECQMs. And then when my now wife matched to her clinical rotations, I just told Sarah like, hey, I'm moving. And they're like, oh, well, you have to get approved. And I was like, well, I'm moving in a month. So let me know if I need to find a new job, which led to them, approving me to go remote. But then they wanted me to travel 100% of the time. And I was just like, I just moved to Southwest Florida. Not going to now spend my entire time flying to places that aren't Southwest Florida. So got a job at the health system she was working at for her clinical rotations, and learned the ambulatory side of the world, where acute was basically where I was prior.
All right. No, it makes sense. And so that you answered one of the questions I had, which is what made you, so you started out in Cerner and then you ended up going to a couple different hospital systems. It sounds like as your wife was going through the various rotations and earning those degrees and whatnot and getting or finishing up the education, that it made sense that you would rotate through the different hospital systems and go in that aspect. So now as you're going through that, and you're now in Florida and you moved around and you worked with a couple different hospital systems and as well as with Cerner, what made you kind of switch gears or start to explore the entrepreneurial path or doing kind of your own thing? Was it out of a matter of, hey, we're making another move and I can't find a job this time? Or was it more of, hey, I have a desire and I always wanted to do it, or now is the right time? Or, kind of what was that genesis for looking to start to do your own business? And was it one that started on the side while you were still working, or did you take the plunge? And I know there's like 20 questions in there, but just kind of curious what motivated the shifting of gears.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to the old adage that like everyone says, right? There's 2 ways you become an entrepreneur. It's either that like something directly impacts you or happens to you or someone close to you, and you take it up as kind of your mantle of this is what I'm going to do. Or in kind of my case, it's like I just got tired of working for people that were incompetent. Like if I'm being completely frank, I was a regulatory expert, but the quality director in the last hospital I was at didn't know how to tie his shoes if it meant reading a regulatory compliance document. So I saved them $4.5 million by making them compliant within a very short window, because they neglected to look at how they were going to submit what they were going to do. On the other side of things, like my director had no idea about anything regulatory. So it was just kind of like me out on my own island, like making sure that the hospital was compliant, and everyone above me, was basically getting to set on my shoulders, right, and look good. And so I got to the point of like, why am I doing someone else's mission or someone else's, goals? I need to go and figure out what I want to do. And so I started the side hustle. I highly recommend even like, people that will start working for my company. Like if you have a passion, if you were able to cultivate skills, like obviously we want to grow you and bring you in and have you stay here. But like, if you have a passion, you want to work on something on the side that doesn't, directly take away from what we're doing, then, more power to you. Because like, I feel like in the corporate world today, it's very stifling, right? This is your 9 to 5, this is your window, this is what you do. And so when I was working there, I just got to the point of like, I need to find my own path. I need to find my own creed and like go after it. And when I was doing all the compliance stuff, I found that there was this new documentation point with UDI and unique device identifiers. There was nothing on the market that could do kind of the end-to-end transcription and notifications that I was looking for. Because as I went around the hospital with that new documentation point, I was like, how do we do this today? Like, we have a new documentation point. What do we do today? And I got everything from, well, we do it in pre-op, we do it in post-op, we do the documentation in op notes, or worst, it was like, we have a notebook and we write stent information in the notebook. It was like, well, what if somebody has left-handed handwriting and they smudge the ink and you can't tell if it's a 6 or an 8, or someone spills coffee on it? Like, what do we do then? They're like, I don't know. And so it's like, so we could have a recall, we could have an important notice on a device that a patient is relying on and could potentially die from if they don't get that notification. And our solution is a piece of paper with a pen. And then when somebody has an issue with it, they're then coming back and going through a paper book and then trying to see if they can read the transcription and then go find the patient. And it's like, that seems like it's a lot of time that's being wasted for like a very important notice in which like patients don't get notified and ultimately end up with the brunt of that with, loss of life or loss of quality of life.
Oh,
So
definitely.
to answer kind of like a roundabout of what you asked, it was like, I wanted to go my own path. I started with a side hustle. Got to the point where it was like, all right, I need to focus on this fully. And, that's been the journey over the last year and a half or so of like, let's build it, get the MVP, get all the regulatory builds in. What are the other solutions? Starting to compile that like team together. And, now we're at the point of starting to commercially launch and become viable.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. And that's a lot of times, I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that get to the point to say, hey, I think I can do this better. I can do it cheaper, faster, quicker, more efficiently, less errors and all the, or any or all the above. And you say, I can't really, where I'm at is not, doesn't provide for that or allow for that. And there are a myriad of reasons. They may not want to invest in it. They may not see it. They may have other priorities. They may not have the budget, any number of things. But you're saying at some point, if this is getting done, I've got to do it in a different context. And so you decide to go out on your own. Now, one of the things you also will sometimes see, especially with entrepreneurs, is then when you get out and actually say, I can do this better, I can do or cheaper, faster, all those reasons why you go out on your own, you get into and you say, this is a lot harder than I thought. In other words, hey, how do I do all the employees? How do I get this funded? How do I manage payroll? How do I, go out and find people that are willing to buy, do marketing and sales and all those things that you don't really think about when you're working for someone else and you're using the system, but now you're having to build it and you're having to sell it. So what was your experience? Was it one where it was a smooth and easy transition? Was it one where it was a little more bumpy and had to figure a lot more things out? Or how did it go as you decided to start it out as a side hustle?
Well, so as a side hustle, like it was okay. Like finding other people similar minded, it was all right, like with existing kind of side hustles. So I originally started like consulting for a group and trying to figure out how to make what they had better. But really I'll say the personalities of like what I wanted to do and what they wanted to do were different. So I went and just said, okay, I'm just going to go and do what I see as my vision on my own. In that I tried to hedge it, right? So I was like, I'm a 20-something entrepreneur. What health system is going to buy from a 20-something who's never done sales before? I don't know kind of what I'm doing in that arena. So I went out and I found someone to like bring in. I brought them in and let's just say it didn't really work out. And we'll just kind of leave it at that. Just there were a lot of, I'll say, mistakes. And I like to make the reference that like, if you run with scissors and you don't fall on it one time and it works out for you, like that's great. But you probably shouldn't just be running around with scissors all the time saying like, yeah, it'll work at all occasions, right? So it's like essentially the biggest kind of thing that I learned and like how I started out and what I focused on and how I kind of made that entrepreneur journey was like, you really just got to trust yourself, right? You can't go out and look at it and say, use that imposter syndrome of like, hey, I don't know if I'm good enough. Hey, why is somebody going to buy from me? Because the second you start asking questions like that, like no one's going to buy from you, right? You have to have that confidence. You got to have that mindset of like, I'm doing this. This is what I'm going to accomplish. Here's how I'm going to accomplish it. And I will find those steps along the way, and I will make it happen. And it's not going to be easy in every step of the regard. So like you might run into something where you raise a little bit of money and then the money starts to run out. And then you make a decision of, okay, do I suffer a little bit and protect my investors, or do I pack it in? And, there were so many times along the early stage of the journey that like, I wasn't pulling a paycheck. It was very, very tight at home. Like my wife's a resident, like I said, we have 2 kids. So it was very, very kind of touch and go financially. But like I owed it to those people who invested from the get-go that like I was going to be a fiduciary in their investment and not just say, hey, I tried, we took your money and nothing happened. So thanks a lot, goodbye. So it was, I grin and bear it. You go through, you suffer, you get what you need for the next steps. You continue to grow it and work with it, and, scrap everything together that you can. And then, you get that next investment wing and then you feel good. And now it's, how do I get to the next one? Right. So, when we're pushing through these next phases and stuff, it's like the grit and determination is there, which is also good for investors to see, right? Like, hey, I've suffered. If I suffer for these guys for peanuts of what, comparatively of what they put in to what we want to raise in the next round, just imagine what I'm going to do for you, right?
Oh, I think that there's a lot of good points in there, and definitely sounds like, it's one of those where a lot of people have that journey, and you do kind of get to the, hey, as we're getting this up and going, I can either try and, get out of it what I can and make the money what I can, and I'll pay myself an exorbitant salary, no matter the cost type of a thing. And if it goes under, so be it, I'll make some good money on the way. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to sacrifice, or we're going to figure this out, or I may take a reduced salary, or, for a period of time, or any of those numbers. And it is one where, it's a proving point both to yourself that you're willing to sacrifice, and also to those that are looking to invest in you and be along the journey. So I think there's a lot of great points in there. Now, as you kind of, bring that up to a bit, or I think where you guys are at today, or, as you continue forward, kind of where do you see the next 6 to 12 months going for you guys? Kind of what's the roadmap or the plan?
Yeah, so I mean, we got another tranche of cash here at the end of last year. So with that, we brought on our first employee to focus on the commercialization. We're in advanced conversations with a number of hospitals as well as device manufacturers that we're communicating with as well. So we're in those initial conversations, or some are closer to the end. We just got to get it in and get it, running in some of those first customer sites, and then we're kind of ready to go off to the races. That next 6 to 12 month runway is really, like I said, focused on the commercialization, getting it insights, getting those value statements, showing the ROI, showing the value that we bring, that we know that we have encompassed within our platform. But it's just getting to that bridge to the next step, right? And I think that like that's a big instance of like startups, right? So everything is kind of piecemeal, and it's what cash do I need at the minimum to get from A to B. And then once you get there, you got to, at the same time you're doing A to B, you got to start raising money for how do I get to B to C. And then as you start doing B to C, you're already raising money from C to D. So you're constantly just like saying, here's what I'm going to accomplish. Here's the steps that we're going to take to get there. And, at the same time thinking about, well, once I get there, what's my next step and how much money do I need and how do I go raise that money? And so it's been a lot smaller steps, like as you get closer to the inception of the idea. But now we're moving towards, that professional seed round with professional VCs, and out of kind of the friends, family kind of investment arena. And then how do we move that to a seed round? And then what are those target customers? What are those target markets in which we get a penetration amount and then raise the next amount of money? Because, the name of the game is don't run out of money, but at the same time, you don't want to give away your company for peanuts, right? So it's kind of that adage of don't sell the farm for the radishes. Like, you'll get more radishes. So it's like, you'll be fine. Just don't give it up for a small amount when you can continue to work on it and build it and know that payout is, down the road, as far as like growing it to what you want it to be. And I'll key in real quick, like, so payout, like that terminology, I think that's also an important distinction to make for these early entrepreneurs and what you're doing, because there's other payouts outside of just financial means. Everybody wants to hear that word and think like, oh, well, I'm gonna sell it for $100 million and I want to keep 50% of it so I can put 50 million in the bank. But like, if you're really solving a problem and you're not creating a problem to solve, like some of that payout is like actually seeing your product do what it's supposed to do and actually impact people that you've targeted. Like, the problem, what's the issue, how do we fix it? So now that I fixed it, like that's the reason that you started your company, right? I mean, I guess not everybody. Some people are saying I want to make a buck, but like for those that are looking at here's the thing that I'm solving, seeing it in action and seeing it actually make the impact to those people that you started it for, like that's part of that like great payment that you get back, that's non-financial.
No, and I think there's a lot of great takeaways, and I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of different motivations, and sometimes you may even take a reduced pay, but you love what you're doing, or it's enjoyable, and so there's a lot of different ways and motivations as to why you're doing your own business. So, well, as we've kind of reached now a bit or the end of your journey, and even looking a bit to where you guys are headed, great time to always transition at the end of the journey to the two questions I always ask about your journey. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
I mean, I'd go back and reference the kind of imposter syndrome. So the worst business decision I made was, hey, I can't do this on my own. I need to have somebody who's been there, done that, like on their resume. Let me go find them, and then they'll help me learn and grow along the way. Whereas, like, if they're not passionate about it and they're not the ones who are driven to like actually make a change, they might be there as like a figurehead, but they're not going to actually help you in any sense along the way. They may even drive you towards bad decisions that, they're looking for the financial outcome, right? They're not looking for the other impacts of, hey, I'm impacting these patients, or hey, I'm impacting these direct people and solving the problem. So like worst business decision was not trusting myself and saying like, I'm going to do this come hell or high water. And so now that I kind of learned that, I've always made myself 100% available to anybody starting out their entrepreneurial journey of like, I'm not going to charge you a consultant fee and like pay me $200 an hour to sit here and talk through like, what you should do or that. I've had multiple meetings with people already about like, let me just, give you an overview of like my experience, the mistakes that I made. And then you can take those into account of like, is that a mistake that you potentially could avoid or not? Because I thought it was a silver bullet, right? I'm going to bring on this person, bring them a lot of equity in. We're going to go hand in hand, and every misstep along the way that like I could make, they're going to say, nope, don't do it this way. This is what you need to do. And so every business is different. Every year, every decade, every like upgrade or regulatory requirement that gets introduced then adds more folds. So even if someone was successful 20 years ago, it has no bearing on are they going to be successful to tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And
No,
so
I would certainly agree with agree with that. And I think circling back is, the imposter syndrome is one where it can be difficult. And I think people even that you look and think have a successful business is oftentimes on the inside, they're still wondering when the business is going to go under, when it's going to fail, and when they're going to be everybody else is going to be, all the naysayers are going to be proven right. So I think that's always something that people are having to juggle and deal with. Second question I always ask is, talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Go all in. I mean, it's something, if you're going to get into it, it's like, was it Parks and Rec? Like, don't whole or half-ass it, you got to whole ass it. So go all in. You can't sit there to the side and say, I'm going to work on this small business, but I'm going to do it under the confines of 9 to 5. Like if you jump in and you're not the founder or you're someone early that's joining in, like you got to look at it as this is your baby too, right? And so just because you join in and there's no huge equity stake that's given to you out of the gate, like it still behooves you to help out. And like, those equity stakes can always be improved, right? So show your work, don't necessarily need it in a contract when you start, but like also when you start those things, find people who are like, where they're honorable and like what they say is what they mean. A lot of people will kind of like say one thing out of one side of their face and then the other side do something else. Like I worked with one startup where they had given me a contract of here's what we're going to pay you, here's the equity incentive, and then when it kind of got brought to light towards the end of my engagement with them, they were like, oh, well, I know you signed it, you've been working on this for like a year or whatever, but we never countersigned it. So like it doesn't happen, it's void, it's not, we don't owe you anything. And it's like, well, that's not how the law works. We worked under this like agreement that we both had an understanding that you wrote it, you gave it to me, I signed it, I gave it back. Just because you didn't send it back to me you still worked under the agreement to this point, so you can't
No,
switch
I
it
think
around.
there's definitely a lot of truth to that, and I think that probably going all the way back is to do the all in, and I think that you have to be committed to the business if you're going to go in, because it is not going to be easy, and there's going to be bumps. There's going to be a lot of fun times, but there also is going to be a lot of times where you're going to have the grit to make it through. So I think that's a great takeaway. Well, as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, or find out more?
So you can reach me out on LinkedIn. It's Ryan Bass. You can also send me an email at rbass@carrier.com, CAREIER. Very open. My number will be on the website when we release the new website that comes out hopefully in the next week or so. So feel free to reach out. You can reference the podcast, and I'm more than happy to set aside time, meet, talk about any of the items above.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect up, find out more, and support a great business and a great product. So with that, as we wrap up, thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you are have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. You can just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things to the listeners. Make sure to click subscribe, share, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes and journeys. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin.